Why do they want to be part of the position?
I think because they had other shops when they went to
Yeah, much of like and so that's nice. That's basically after all, so I was just sort of trying all the places linked to all the money and all the expertise in this work to trouble and set up government and so much trouble. And I was like, all right, so it was all the like academics, business leaders, let's take all the cash. No, it's just really cheap. And then they ran up the government and stuff. They believe that they got the legitimate. Whereas now it's sort of transition one time, no action necessary. But they're hard Chinese. They were the ruling class. So, but they believe in it.
when I went back to
I'm only staying 5 minutes. I need to go get this. It's a matter of choice. Every time someone arrives, I think the ball is Number 1 day of the year. Number 1. It's that and first sitting day of the year. Seven? Okay. Yeah. So arriving speed 6-ish.
All right. Yeah.
Well, hello everybody, and thanks very much for coming along. I'm thrilled to welcome to Australia the UK Secretary of State for International Trade, Liz Truss. Secretary Truss and I have had some wonderful discussions this morning, and indeed she is also meeting with a number of my cabinet colleagues here. Australia and the UK are obviously the deepest of relationships, the deepest of family connections, the deepest of friends. And Australia seeks to ensure that as the UK pursues its agenda of exiting the European Union, that we have the richest, deepest economic ties possible for the future. The UK is already a top 10 trading partner for Australia, our 8th largest in terms of two-way trade. It's a critical destination for many Australian exports, and we hope to see that grow in the future, because at present, market access to the UK has been restricted as a result of EU arrangements. Now, of course, as is well known, we are as a country already pursuing constructive, positive engagements with the European Union in terms of free trade negotiations there. But we stand absolutely ready to work with the UK at the moment they are ready to do so, as quickly as they are able to do so in terms of pursuing FTA negotiations with the UK and concluding that as quickly as possible. I want to thank Secretary Truss for her enthusiasm, commitment and positivity in terms of the discussions that we're having. We share, I think, a strong and positive ambition to make sure that the UK-Australia relationship is as rich and deep as it possibly can be into the future. We understand the complementarities of our economies, the opportunities for enhanced export trade and investment growth into the future, and we are firmly committed to realise that. Secretary Truss.
Well, thank you very much, Minister Birmingham. It's fantastic to be here in Australia. As I arrived at Sydney, I was greeted by rain, so I felt like I'd come home. And we do have a massively exciting opportunity. The UK will be leaving the European Union on the 31st of October, deal or no deal. And that will give us the opportunity to strike new trade deals with the rest of the world. This is the first time in 45 years that the UK has its own independent trade policy. And Australia is one of the first countries that we consulted on in terms of doing a trade deal. It's one of our absolute priorities. We are old friends, of course, as nations. We share a proud democratic history. We're both free trading nations. We both believe in free enterprise. But I think there is an incredible set of new opportunities that we have as nations together, whether it's in areas like financial services, technology, where we can do much more close work together, or indeed other areas. I noticed that one of our top exports to you is spirits, and your top export to us is wine. So there's more to be done in terms of lowering tariff in those areas as well. But what I have said to Minister Birmingham is we want a fully comprehensive trade deal that reflects our deep ongoing relationship, the friendship between our two countries, the fact that Australians want to come and live and work in Britain and Brits want to come and live and work in Australia. And leaving the European Union really does give us a chance as a country to become more outward looking, to become more competitive, and to deepen our links with our partners right across the world. And the reason that I've chosen to make Australia one of the first countries I've visited as Trade Secretary is this is an absolute priority for me to get on with this trade deal. So thank you very much for having me. I've had a very warm welcome here in Canberra, and we're very happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Well, thank you. So we'll take a few questions each if you like.
You mentioned freedom of movement there, and in terms of allowing more Australians to go and work in the UK and vice versa. Do you see in particular any relaxing of the current regulations, the sort of one-year visa that you get in Australia going over there, only up until the age of 30? Is that on the table, and what do you envisage that finalising?
So we've already made changes as a government. We've been clear, in fact, that we want to adopt the Australian-based point system in terms of our new immigration system as we leave the European Union. We've recently made an announcement that we're extending the work period after foreign students come to the UK for 2 years. But of course, our two countries have a special link and a historic relationship, and it's certainly something that we will be looking at as part of our free trade negotiations.
Minister Birmingham, what could this be worth to Australia, and what particular exports do you think would really be encouraged by this?
Well, it's no secret that as part of the EU, market access in terms of agricultural products has been limited, and that is something that through both our EU negotiations and our prospective UK negotiations that we seek to address and to ensure much stronger access for our farmers and our farm businesses into the future. But we also, as Secretary Truss has rightly identified, see this as being a comprehensive and ambitious agreement. We see enormous opportunities in relation to the services sector for enhanced cooperation. The UK is, of course, a well-known and well-respected and regarded financial hub and centre of the world. We share common rule of law, common language, common opportunities, therefore, for greater integration and cooperation of our businesses across many of those spheres as well. So it is by no means a narrow range of opportunities. What is it worth? Well, as I say, in relation to all of our trade relationships, government negotiations and agreements open the door. Businesses determine to what extent they walk through those open doors and to what extent the value of that trade is. But we are confident the enthusiasm is there from Australian business, from British business, to maximise the opportunities under any agreement that we strike.
Can we bring back the 70s relationship before the European Common Market?
Well, I think to an extent, that is something that frames part of the history of our discussions, that yes, the entry into the common market shut off some opportunities, but this is an agreement for the future. It will be an agreement that looks towards being comprehensive and ambitious, that does integrate modern aspects, not just in the services sector, but reflecting cooperation in digital trade, in e-commerce, so ensuring that we address all of those areas that form part of the best practice trade agreements in the world at present.
Is there a bit of irony there that after turning their back on Australia, they're now keen to re-engage with us?
Well, a lot has happened over the past 40 or so years. I think both Minister Birmingham and I weren't around in politics when those decisions were made. But, and the European Union has changed. One of the issues we have faced is increased regulatory harmonisation driven by the EU, which has prevented us from being able to strike those deals and being able to work with other partners around the world. And in fact, the UK trades more with the rest of the world than the EU, and that is where a lot of the growing markets are. So there is a big opportunity for us to do things differently and to use those new freedoms we have. Of course, we want a good relationship with the EU. We want to secure a free trade deal. But what we don't want is the regulatory tie-ins that we've had in the past that's prevented, I think, the UK from truly exploring some of the opportunities ahead of us.
I'll deal with it quickly there, and that is if we held grudges over things that happened 40 plus years ago in relation to our trade or foreign policy or anywhere else, we'd never accomplish anything. So we absolutely look to the future.
Secretary Truss Filmer from the BBC for Trade is critical, as are the politics, of course. Back in June, you said that proroguing Parliament was an archaic manoeuvre and that Boris Johnson had ruled it out. Firstly, was he wrong to do so? And secondly, if the Supreme Court says that the Prime Minister lied to the Queen, should he resign?
Well, first of all, every Parliament gets prorogued in advance of the Queen's speech, and that's precisely what the Prime Minister has done. We've already had a very long Parliament with a lot of discussion taking place, and it's right that the Prime Minister sets out his new agenda. Now, what really ought to have happened is an election. We know that Parliament has struggled to make up its mind, even though the public have been very clear that they want to see us deliver Brexit. The right thing would be for the Labour Party to agree to have an election, and that way the country could move forward.
And what about the Supreme Court question, Secretary Truss, in terms of if it goes against Boris Johnson, should he resign? If the court decides that he lied to the Queen, the head of state, should he resign?
I don't answer hypothetical questions.
You talk about wanting a comprehensive agreement. These are renowned for taking years. So what is the timeframe that you're looking at, and how does that rate in terms of how much of a priority Australia is compared to the US, the EU and Asian nations?
Well, I think a comprehensive agreement can be reached in fairly short order. We've already had a very positive discussion about the types of issue that would be considered in such an agreement. CTPPP, which we are very keen to be part of, has already made significant progress in terms of discussions of one of those issues. And one of the things I've been clear about with Minister Birmingham is that the UK is very keen to accede to TPP as part of our negotiations with Australia and other partners such as New Zealand as well. So I think we can make rapid progress. We're one country negotiating with Australia rather than the EU 27, which are a rather more hard nut to crack. And we've got a lot of common interests. We want to make progress. And we've already done significant work between our two countries in terms of official level working groups.
What are the points of difference, that is, the tensions that are already arising in early negotiations?
I think it's probably a little early to get to the tensions. We'll start formal negotiations when the UK realises its policy to leave the European Union. We are confident as a country that we can get on and negotiate quickly, land a deal quickly. We've demonstrated as a government over the last 6 years our capacity to do that in a diverse range of settings, that negotiations that had dragged on for years and years in the case of many of our FTA partners were brought to a conclusion by the coalition government. And we're confident that these negotiations won't drag on at all, and that we will be able, with the shared ambition, to make this a comprehensive agreement to ensure that it opens up markets as much as possible, is one that we can then land quickly and do so to the benefit of both our economies.
Secretary Truss, do you see any tensions?
Well, look, every trade deal, every trade discussion will inevitably have elements of negotiation, and both of our countries have interests, and I'm sure Minister Birmingham will fight hard for Australia's interests. I will fight hard for Britain's interests to make sure we get the best possible deal. But I think there are huge mutual advantages. not just in terms of trade, but also in terms of investment. We already have huge amounts of investment made by Australian business into the UK and vice versa. And I think this can help grow our economies and create new markets for our industry. So I think there's a lot of exciting prospects ahead.
Mr. Secretary, Connie Moore-Gilbert, Jolie King and Mark Firkin, three individuals, two of them have dual citizenship, Kylie and Joel Lee. They've obviously been taken prisoner or arrested in Iran. What's the position of both governments at the moment? Can you give us an idea of what's being done, and how alarmed are you by the situation?
These, Jonathan, are very serious matters. Of course, the Foreign Minister, Maurice Payne, has spoken on these matters during the course of the week, and I've no doubt will continue to do so. Australia's been clear that for a long period of time now we've been providing consular assistance, and that we have expectations in relation to the fair and transparent treatment of citizens, and that we will continue to advocate very clearly for that.
Likewise, our Foreign Secretary, Dominic Raab, is very concerned about this issue and he's dealing with it.
Thank you.
So, Secretary Truss, I mean, you say you'd like to see this done rapidly, this deal. Do you have a timetable in mind? Are you talking first half of next year, end of this year? What's the timetable?
Well, I would definitely say months rather than years.
Secretary Truss, just in regards, are there any areas of Australian produce agriculture that will be off the table in terms of discussions, areas that you don't want to see any changes to tariffs?
I'm sure you'll appreciate that I'm not going to conduct the negotiation in this press conference. We will be having detailed discussions about all of these issues in due course.
Thanks, everybody. And on a parting note, just to, of course, note that Secretary Truss expressed her disappointment that she wasn't personally able to bring the ashes for.
I'll take a trade deal instead.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.